Following up on a game with a unique mixture of mechanics can always be really tricky as an indie developer. Do you give the player more mechanics in the sequel to add depth to your game and change it up from the original? It's possible in that process that you may overcomplicate the game and lessen the main mechanic's impact, thus making a worse game overall. Do you go the complete opposite way, just giving the audience more of what the first game was? Will people call it derivative? That it should have just been DLC? My point in this intro here is simple. A good sequel of a hit game can be a lot more complicated than it looks at first glance. That's what was facing Hand of Fate 2 with its release, which occurred on November 7th, 2017 on the PC. It currently costs $29.99 and is a mixture of a collectible card game, a Dungeons & Dragons-like RPG experience, and a bit of Assassin's Creed combat. The first game was a great indie hit that got people's attention. So how did the second one do? Was it more of the same, or was there just enough changes and improvements to keep your attention? That's what I'm here to find out in this review. Now, unlike my other reviews, this one will be a tiny bit different. It's not going to have your typical review sections like gameplay and presentation. Instead, I'm going to start with one of the game's 22 challenges, specifically the Death Challenge. The challenge's story is simple. I've got a bounty on my head, and a particular assassin named the Reaper is sorta coming to collect. For the purposes of this review, I'm not going to show you that entire run. That would be silly. However, what this method allows me to do is show you the structure of a typical challenge, and where the game's mechanics come into play, while still keeping some semblance of continuity. And besides, it's a bit easier for me in the long run. So for those who haven't played Hand of Fate, here's the deal. You play a scenario, which is like a tabletop Dungeons & Dragons session. You're given a theme in which the story will be centered around, and a couple of hints of what this particular quest will focus on. In the case of the death scenario, I get these hints. The game specifically calls out that I'm going to need to increase my maximum life in order to survive the Reaper's arrows. It'll be revealed later on that the arrow will do 140 damage, meaning that I'll need to gain a bit of life if I'm going to pass this challenge. In addition, I'll be fighting a lot of thieves, which are faster enemies that can do smaller bits of damage, but significant ones that add up over time. So to conquer death itself, you need to build a deck with all the best weapons, spells, and armor, and all that jazz, right? Well, sorta. But it's a bit more complicated than that. You'll need to construct your deck for the challenge ahead, but rather than bore you with all the construction elements right now, let's get right into the core of the mission. The dealer usually starts off giving you a little bit of backstory or commenting on the quest at hand, and it's one of the game's first strengths. For being a collection of code, the dealer feels surprisingly human, doing well to provide a perspective on the game you're involved with, like talking about how death represents change for some rather than a strict definition of morality. But it's the small touches here that really work, like when you stop paying attention to the game for a little bit, and he snarkily makes fun of you for it. Anyway, the first card dealt is the Marked for Death card, a story card to begin my journey. A small ruffian comes up and talks about my exploits from before, which is a nice touch to keep my first missions seeming important, and an actual journey that I've gone on. It also helps that characters like this feel real, as she wanting bread in exchange for information means that she's not just a helpful NPC, but she feels like a character she's portraying, a street rat that's just trying to find a way to live. She tells you something that I already knew: the Reaper is coming from me. He's the fancy assassin after all. After that, I get a little bit more information about my mission. In order to survive Reaper's arrow, I need 130 life at least, although that's how much damage it actually does, so technically I'll need 135. However, to surprise the Reaper, I'll need 170. Now you may wonder if the idea of surprising the Reaper will give me an advantage in battle, and no, it actually doesn't. However, you see this? These tokens? Well, if I beat the overall quest, I'll get the silver token. However, to get the gold one, I'll need to complete it with that 170 health condition. These tokens are important because they unlock new cards, give you more options in the overall scheme, and give you more reasons to maximize your deck and try to perfect your runs, giving the game a little bit more of replayability. Alright, let's move to the first card, which I go on by clicking on the path I want to take. I flip it over and reveal it's one of the dealer's cards that are inserted by the dealer at the start of the challenge to try to balance your stacking of the deck in your favor a tiny bit. It seems I've gotten the attention of some thieves that sorta want that bounty on my head, and immediately we enter one of the main modes of this game, the combat. If you've played a Batman Arkham Asylum or Assassin's Creed game, you've played this combat before. Enemies encircle you and attack one at a time mostly. You've only got a couple of actions, a basic attack, a more block-breaking attack, as well as a dodge roll and a block. It's your simple reactionary combat. Dodge unblockable attacks, parry the regular attacks to get a chance to do some extra damage, and keep combos up so that you can do special attacks that can stun or do extra damage depending on your weapon. Now, of all the mechanics in Hand of Fate 2, combat may be the weakest. Granted, it's not bad, it's just pretty standard here, despite some good underlying elements. Once you get into the groove of combat, it's relatively easy. But the game does do its best to keep you a little off kilter by changing up enemy types, even within the classes. Overall, there are 4 major enemy factions in the game: the Empire, the Northerners, the Thieves, and the Corrupted. Each have their own strengths and weaknesses. For example, the Thieves I'm facing right now are fast and do their damage quick, like I said before. For me, throwing out attacks with heavier weapons against the Thieves without thought will accumulate damage on myself very quickly. But if I have weapons like the dual daggers here, then that challenge will be a lot easier for me to deal with. I have to note, if you're a patient player, you're going to not have many problems here. But if you are, you're gonna have some troubles. Even with me getting into a groove early in this battle, notice how I get over aggressive and take some damage here. Now, I've got a bunch of life to work with, so it's not a problem now. But then you have to realize that the Reaper Arrows condition is going to cause me problems down the road. I do have to take the time to mention one of my favorite aspects of this game, and it's the ragdoll effects when you end a battle. Defiant Development, thank you for these gems. It never failed to get a laugh out of me, and while some may say it doesn't add to the ambiance of the game and its themes, screw it. It's fun, and that's what this game is a whole load of. Fun. By taking out the Thieves, I gain a little fame, which will come into play later on. I also find some equipment, and lucky for me, it's platinum equipment. Now, the rewards for these quests are randomized in this case, but starting off with getting this trinket early on is going to help a hell of a lot. Platinum equipment in this game is basically overpowered equipment that you can only have a certain amount of at the end. In this case, this trinket will make it very easy to succeed at a certain task later on that I packed into my deck. Which, yes, that's why I brought it along. The whole synergy thing. Next, I find a general store, and I'm very glad here because I could use some of the resources it sells already. In particular, I need food, which is another smart balancing decision in this game, and balance is going to sort of be the theme of this review. For food, each time that I move, I'll need to spend some, or I can use food to help regenerate health. In this quest with health being so important, paying a premium on food isn't a bad idea early on, and that's something that, well, I learned by trying this quest before. I found myself not paying enough attention to food and then couldn't heal when I truly needed to. I'll touch on more of this in a bit, but right now, we've got a companion to help out, which is another new addition to the game. You have 4 companions that you can bring along during your journey, each with their own set of skills to help you out, and it's again another smart balancing decision in how they sorted the skills they had here. For this quest, for example, I ended up choosing the Magician for one reason. his ability to give me a shield in the middle of battle so that I could take a hit. Knowing that health would be important for me to protect, that seemed better than the other companions that I had available, who could still have helped me, but he let me play the way that I wanted to beat this mission. Companions also have a unique set of quests to complete, which is what I'm doing with my good magician friend here. He's sorta got a deadly curse against him, looking for a cure and all that jazz. This leads to some battle with some skeletons, and for some reason this makes me want to talk a little bit about the visual presentation. Don't ask me why, I just do. For an indie game, the graphics in combat aren't necessarily bad, but my biggest complaint about them is that they're too subdued. The fantasy element of the game makes me want brighter colors on things, like the magician's robe here, and effects like the orbs glowing in the skeleton's hands just don't do enough for me. Some of the environments can also be rather meh to begin with, and you can see this with some of the rock formations. Now look, it's an indie game, I don't expect that quality of graphics here, but I also admit that some of the designs also don't do it for me for some of these enemies. These skeletons, for example, they need something unique, some more oomph to them. Sound design is a tiny bit better. Nothing too major here. You hear the clashing of swords against enemies, grunts from your hero, and little noises to indicate if you were successful or not. Some sounds are hard to hear, however, like the sound of a bomb being thrown, as it's too faint and hard to hear over the rest of the grunting and attacks. I don't think this was purposeful either. Yeah, you could argue that the bomb is supposed to be more stealthy, but it's way too soft to really even notice unless you're trying to notice it. Listen and hear what I'm talking about here. While I'm here also, I do want to draw attention to the fact that some of the game's boss battles are rather weak. This death mage, for example, ends up being a pushover. Sure, she could summon skeletons, but it ends up like any other battle, to be honest, and she doesn't really add a unique challenge. In fact, if I had to give the weakest element of the game to you, it's the boss battles. Let's fast forward here as I don't want to give away the ending to this quest. Let's talk about the non-combat challenges of the game. The game will throw a variety of different challenges at you, some based on skill, others will be based on luck. For example here, at this platinum challenge with the shrine, I have a more luck-based dice throw. I do want to commend the interactivity here. Throwing the dice actually throws the dice proportional to the strength of your mouse movement. It's a small detail, but it's a really nice touch that immerses you in the experience. You feel like you actually threw the dice. Now you'll see here that things don't go well for me. I fail this challenge. And that leads me to one of the game's greatest strengths. Its balance and how it uses the deck system and your options to help you in situations like this shrine challenge. See, synergy of your deck is a huge element of this game, as I mentioned before. I chose to bring the shrine with me despite the fact that I didn't really have anything to help me with the dice throws. If I were to have brought the Wanderer, for example, as my companion, he would have offered me an extra dice in exchange for losing him in combat for a couple of turns. In all honesty, I probably should have brought a different challenge with me, something like Goblin Town. But when the synergy comes together, things really can work in your favor. The very next challenge is a challenge I've had problems completing up to this point, the Alchemist challenge. Now to win this, I basically need to get all three of the same color ingredients, but I need to get the red one in particular to get the token. This challenge is a little bit more skill based, as you can semi-predict how fast you need to hit the stop button in order to succeed. However, the game also seems to change things up a bit from challenge to challenge, so that you don't get used to the timing of any one particular one. In a previous run, you could see that I fail, but I'm going to succeed at this one, because of that platinum trinket I got from before. See, that trinket that I got before allows me to shift the wheel on every attempt. And considering the ways that things are set up on this wheel, that means I can shift it to red every time. I didn't even need my companion who could give me an extra attempt one round just in case. That's because my plan with these two cards came together and gave me exactly what I needed. And would you look at that? The red potion ups my life quite a bit. It's almost like I planned this out. And it feels so good. Now, not every plan comes together like this, obviously, or the game would be too easy. In fact, part of the fun of this game is trying out those cards you don't know about for the first time, seeing what they do, what stories they have to tell, and how you can get past them. Of course, it'll lead to some failed runs, but it's still pretty hilarious while it happens, and you have a ton of fun. There are some really good scenarios this time around that play out in these cards, and you're always wanting to get extra tokens to see what is on the horizon. For some of these cards, however, it's very hard to understand what the condition of the token is in order to complete it. Take the Cartographer quest, for example, where I have to reveal the map to gain gold. There's only certain challenges that this will work to get the token because you need a lot of the map to be revealed, but in some cases you just don't have that much of map. I wish the language in the lore would be a little bit more helpful in terms of hinting at this condition, and this isn't the only card that I had trouble deciphering. Let's change focus once again and look at the presentation of the card-based portions of the game here. To be frank, I love it. Some people may complain about the fidelity here, but I love the use of lights. How the battlefield is lit up when you're facing a quest, just enough to see what you need to see, focusing on the spot in question, leaving the dealer a little bit in the dark. I love the little touches on the cards, like the bend along the life card here. See, every presentation element here adds to the story being told. The dealer's voice is also high tier. I'm sorry, I can't put it into the ultimate tier here. That goes to the darkest dungeon narrator. But taking the silver isn't bad at all, as this voice actor really adds good inflection to the appropriate spots when he needs to. He adds laughter to fill awkward voids when things don't go your way, or gets serious at the right time to emphasize a point. The performance here overall is excellent, and I hope that Anthony Scorti, the voice actor, gets a lot more work in the future. Take a listen and hear what I'm talking about.
Every city has places that the civilized would be better to avoid. Of course, that's also where you'll find the most interesting people. Those who travel with you are more than mere pawns in this story. They have their own goals and their own needs, yet their stories have ended, or they would be here by your side, would they not? The devil calls, and we must find the possible in the impossible if we wish to push forward. I cannot say that I see the point in taking a request to retrieve false idols from a false cleric, but you will make your own choices.
One other presentation note to the developers. I wish that in a future release, you make the numbers a little bit more noticeable. It's really hard to see them in the background when you're doing damage. Maybe a thicker outline to draw more attention to it, and make that an option in the options menu. Speaking of which, you've actually got a good selection of options here. I like the fact that they took colorblind players into account with the general options, along with having subtitles, which is a lot rarer in indie titles than you would think. Control-wise, you have bindable keys for both the controller and the keyboard, and again, a nice option in the confine cursor to window option. One thing I will say about these general options, however, is that with the reset to defaults option, why is it in the middle of the menu and not at the end of it? It just sort of makes no sense there. Anyway, another good set of audio sliders here, giving you real control of everything sound-wise, even giving you the control of the speaker mode. No complaints at all, in fact. Graphics-wise, the resolution goes up to 4K with up to a 60Hz refresh rate, and VSync options that you see here. In addition, well, just look at the quality options to fine-tune the experience here. Shaders, texture qualities, bloom, anti-aliasing options up to TAA, ambient occlusion options, dithering. I mean, seriously, for an indie game, this option menu is massive. You can see all the options as I scroll through them on the screen here, but even those with mid-level systems or even lower-level systems are probably going to be able to play this game no problem with all the options here. I mean, it's not asking a lot to begin with, but the fact that you have so many options here, I really got to give it to the studio here. Well done. Also, performance-wise, there's no real big performance issues that I saw. 60 FPS with no drops that I saw, with minimal loading times as it distracts you by the zooming in via the card system into battle. No complaints. As I play along, I end up with a big decision after taking out some thieves later on in my journey. See, I've got the choice of some armor here, and I end up having the option of taking some Imperial armor. Knowing that I need a lot of maximum life in order to overcome depth, that plus 20 maximum life is looking really attractive right now. But here's the problem. A lot of these quests battles are suited for daggers and light weapons. Having to use a medium weapon is going to be a bit more troublesome, but it's still doable. Now, unlike the others, however, this decision isn't as hard. It could have been, but you sorta get a chance to adjust before the final battle. So I could just stay with the daggers and only change the sword and get that life boost in the end. I really wish the game didn't give me a chance to change my loadout right before the final battle. I go to that card and automatically I should be attacking the boss. That's it. Don't give me a second chance. But it doesn't really matter anyway, because for some odd reason, I took the helmet here. I don't know why I did. I'm sort of a dummy for this. Thankfully, I make up for it very quickly, as another card I've included to sacrifice a piece of equipment for maximum life, aka the man-eating plant card, fixes this issue, and I get plus 20 health. Remember how I said that planning your deck is important? You can save you from yourself a lot in this game, and I did it here. Yes, I made the wrong decision, but I ended up making the right decision in the end. The wrong deck style, it wouldn't have been possible. See, each of the currencies in the game have their own purpose and helps to the balance of the game. Like I mentioned earlier, food deals with health and being able to take on more challenges. Fame allows you to equip higher level equipment. And gold? Well, gold is the most flexible. It's not as effective as others per piece of item that you've got, but it allows you to adapt to situations a lot easier by spending your way out of it. In this case, because I had all this gold, I could get the armor that I needed. I know I've hammered on the balance portion during this review, but there's a reason for that. It's the game's strongest element by far. Sure, a bad streak of luck can end a run. That will happen, and it will take you some time to understand what each piece of currency, card, and challenge ends up giving you. But once you understand those underlying elements, the game is your oyster. You can play it how you want and succeed if you're smart at it. Not many games, especially in the card area, can really say this. Finally, the time has come to face the Reaper. At full health, I'm able to survive his arrow and have a little life to spare. The Greed Assassin comes for me, and my final challenge in the game awaits. And despite him looking like a magma-burned corpse, he's one of the better bosses in the game. His quick attacks give me a bit of problems with my sword, and all of the decisions that I've made really are coming to the forefront here. My Magician's Shield proves invaluable against his quick attacks despite taking time to recharge. The extra health potions give me a little bit more health to take his attacks. All the health I didn't lose with the attacks up to this point definitely comes into play as I take a bit of damage during this boss fight. Thankfully, with one mighty thrust, I send the assassin packing and help him inside the door of the tavern in the process. Quest is over, and I reap my rewards. The dealer gives a little bit of exposition about me conquering death, and I'm given rewards for all the tokens that I got, aka more options in battle. Don't you love it? Okay. So now that I've given you a taste of what Hand of Fate 2 has to offer, let's wrap this review up. Does the game improve on its predecessor? It does. The new companions, challenges, and additions to the series end up being what it needed, providing more of what made the original game good and adding more depth without sacrificing its core. The unique combination of the tabletop-like card elements with the combat makes for a unique experience, backed up by great writing and interactivity with the dealer. Sure, do I wish the combat had more depth to it? Yeah, I do. And those looking for more action won't find it here. And yes, the game can lead you down some bad paths while you learn its tricks. But frankly, it's pretty fun to go down those paths nonetheless. The game is a solid buy, coming in at an 84 out of 100. So grab it now, unless you're hurting for cash. However, that doesn't take into account my enhancer system, which adjusts the score based on your personal preferences as a player. The main score tries to be as objective as it can be, but the enhancers will adjust it based on you. So, if you fall into one of these categories, add or subtract appropriately from that score. If the first digit of your score changes, then refer to the description on where your new score puts this game's buyability at for you. Coming up next on the channel is 2 top 10 lists for 2017, the best story-based games and the best gameplay-focused games. I split the list this year for reasons that I'll get to in those lists, but expect them in the next week or two. I do have 1 or 2 games that I want to try before I complete the list as a whole. Anyway, this is Dragnix signing out, and leave your thoughts on this review in the comments section below. I know this is a different format, and I'm not necessarily entirely happy with the review, but I do think it gets the points across that it needs to, and gives you an idea of what the game has to offer.